I want to make a slight pivot on this into Germany because you mentioned Germany, and I want to know whether you think. I had John Kiriakou on the show yesterday, and John was like he didn't think that Russia would hit Germany. I think John is wrong. I think John is so wrong that it is astonishing that if Germany and those Taurus missiles are fired into Russia, and one of those things hit Moscow or another city, I think Russia would bomb the living shit out of Germany. At the very least, the factory where those things came out of, and if necessary, closer to home in order to make this point that this is a red line. This is something that we told you is a no-no. But give me your thoughts on the first part about whether or not you think that Trump actually even wants to end the war, or at the very least, his administration even wants to end the war. And next, this thing on Germany about whether or not Russia would hit Germany if indeed Germany passes that Taurus missile to Ukraine.
Well, on the first point, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I agree with what you said early on. Yeah, I mean, that's what they should do, invest in. If it was a democratic government, they would invest in infrastructure and education, healthcare, but it's not a democratic government. It's an oligarchy run by large corporation, weapons contractor, Wall Street banks, and they have their own agendas and own interests, and they use the government for their own purposes, and the public gets screwed time and time again. And yeah, whether a Democrat or Republican really makes no difference, as you point out. So I think your comments are very good, and that helps answer the question. If it was a democratic government and if there are compassionate people in the government, yes, they would want to end the war. I mean, this
Yeah,
war has caused a terrible human cost for the Russian and Ukrainian populations, and
agreed.
especially the people of eastern Ukraine. So any real human being would try and end this conflict and work out some kind of political framework that would prevent future wars between Russia and Ukraine. But instead, since we have these oligarchs, inhuman corporations who profit off endless war and whose goal is American global dominance, and since Russia is a potential rival to the United States in an oil-rich area. And don't forget, yeah, Russia is a country with rich, very rich natural resources. And the oligarchy and Wall Street and corporate interests, their main goal ultimately is to access Russian natural resources.
Right
And
there.
that's why they want to weaken Putin, because Putin was more of a national, he reasserted control. They were, under Boris Yeltsin, they were starting to gain access to those resources. He was a weak leader who kowtowed to the West. And then Putin was supposed to be his successor. Well, he was anointed and elevated as Yeltsin's successor, but he was more, at his core, more of a Russian nationalist, and he started to restore Russian economic sovereignty and restore Russian power and confidence. And that didn't sit well with American oligarchs who want to control Russia's economy and keep Russia weak so they can dominate the entire Eurasian region, which is rich
Mhm.
in oil and gas. And if you go back to this grand strategist that the elite elevate, like Brzezinski and Halford Mackinder in the case of the British Empire, they all, and Brzezinski is not an original thinker. He draws off Halford Mackinder, who was a strategist for the British Empire, and they placed heavy value on controlling Eurasian region as the key to world domination. So that's the main agenda. So ending, if war is good for that agenda because it bogged the Russian down, creates a breach with Germany. That's what they fear. Strong Russia allied with Germany will thwart the designs for control of that Eurasian region and general dominance of the world. So that's what they're trying to prevent. So they want to keep the war going in Ukraine, and they're supporting these governments in Germany that are provoking or threatening outright conflict on Russia. So whether Russia would, I think Putin is a very pragmatic and cautious leader. And I don't think, I mean, I would agree with Kiriakou that I don't think he's going to be prone to attack Germany.
Mhm.
That could breed, cataclysmic consequences on Russia, or an escalation of war against Russia. I think Putin has shown himself to be a calm and a very pragmatic leader who's not overly aggressive. I mean, there were hawks as much as the media builds him up ridiculously, the new Hitler, and that he's going
Yeah.
to has this plan to invade Europe and Ukraine is. I mean, they've reinvoked the domino theory. You know, Ukraine is first, and then when he gets his way in Ukraine, he's going to invade other European countries. I mean, that's not true at all. He was totally provoked in
Agreed.
Ukraine, and he's actually a moderate in the Russian landscape. I mean, there were some, Russians who criticized him for being overly cautious uh, and overly moderate. So I don't think he's going to attack Germany. But I mean, every country does have a breaking point. He's got to defend his country, and he can't continue to. Russia cannot, if they're continuously attacked as they've been, they're going to respond. That's why you see the more aggressive response in Ukraine, because Ukraine upped the ante. The U.S. provided them with these long-range missiles, and the CIA helped develop Ukraine's drone industry, and Ukraine started carrying out drone attacks in Moscow and increasingly missile attacks on Russia. So they're going to respond in kind. And yeah, a good movie was Oliver Stone made a good movie called The Putin Diaries a few years
I
ago, where
saw
he
that. Yeah.
visited with Putin, and you got a sense a bit about Putin and his character and strategy. And he said every action does have a reaction, and a lot of Russian policies have been purely reactive to Western aggression, using Ukraine as their proxy. And unfortunately, the war is not framed in that way in the United States. It's framed as a war of Russian aggression, but more
Right.
and more voices have punctured the narrative and the myth of an unprovoked Russian invasion. So
But
more
just to be
people are
clear,
seeing
though,
the light.
you're saying that if German missiles fired by Germans, which they will be, are fired into Moscow, that Russia doesn't respond to
Oh,
that?
well,
Because
that I don't
that's their
know. I
point of
mean,
view,
if
by the way.
if Russia is directly attacked, yeah, I didn't catch that. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're gonna.
Well, I mean, look,
It's a
if
possibility. I
Germany
don't know
hands
how
if
they
Germany
would
hands
respond
off a
though.
Taurus missile to Ukraine, Germany has to fire that missile. Full stop. There's no way around it. Putin has already said that you cannot fire that missile without the support of Germany. Germany, in leaked video or leaked audio, even said themselves, hey, how can we fire this without our hands being on it? Because their hands are on it if they fire it. So the Russian point of view is if a Taurus missile hits Moscow, it was Germany that fired it. Just like if a Storm Shadow missile hits Moscow, it was the UK that fired it. Or for that matter, the Scout with France. Those France that fired it. How could they not respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately they will respond. I don't know what kind of, if they're going to attack Germany directly. I can't say for sure, but yeah, they will respond. You know,
What stops Germany from giving them more missiles if Germany is not held responsible? To me, this is
yeah,
a logic issue. That's why I'm asking it in this way, because this is the way I think about it. Um, how do you, meaning, if the Russian perspective, even Putin himself said as much, if you fire these missiles at us, you are doing it. This is NATO's direct involvement into the war. So, from the Russian point of view, NATO enters the war directly the moment those missiles are fired into Moscow.
yeah, and I mean, I think all along what we've seen is that they're intent on provoking a world war, and that's why these leaders are very, very dangerous, and it's really now escalating to a very, very dangerous level. And people have been
Yeah.
warning about this for years, and they were shunned to the side. Whether the Ritters, Scott Ritter was a UN weapons inspector, an insider, and he's been at the forefront of warning for years and years, and people like John Marsheimer and others, but they're never given any attention, in the mainstream United States. And this is really escalating to an extremely dangerous level, to the point where we may have a world war. And that seems to be what our leaders want. And if you look at the history of the past world wars, this is the kind of way it started. I mean, and it
Yeah.
would provoke in the West. I mean, there's a long debate among historians, but there are more and more historians who recognize that it was Western country that provoked World War One and even helped provoke World War Two. And they're design a global hegemony, and
Mhm.
that's what leads to these catastrophes.
Yeah, I agree. I disagree with John because the logic of it seemed to compels itself. And I understand that it could create a provocation by NATO, but the provocation is NATO. Like the entire point of the special military operation was because NATO overthrew the government of Ukraine. That's a provocation. They blew off the Minsk agreements. That's a provocation. All of these things are provocations. All of these things are some level acts of aggression. NATO was killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians in the East. Again, that is provocations. And they're doing this stuff knowing full well that at some point, either Russia responds or they allow Ukraine to be added into NATO, which was always a red line, which was a red line back in 2008, which was a red line when the Minsk, meaning it was a red line all along the way. And even though there's propaganda that come out where the West tries to justify its behavior and its actions, propaganda is one thing, reality is something else. If Maris is dumb enough to believe his population is going to be okay with him firing missiles into Moscow with the idea that Moscow may respond by hitting German factories, which, by the way, the entire government says they're going to do. Margarita Simonier, Putin has said it. Medvedev obviously has said it. And even one of the Duma members says, look, we planned for this. We assumed it would come to this point. So in their mind, we are already at war with NATO. In their minds, we are already at war with Germany. And if we allow you to fire one missile, what stops you from firing 10? Or what stops the UK from firing 10? Or what stops France from firing 10? The moment that you call what they consider to be a bluff, I don't know how you allow it, which is why I disagree. Regardless of what happens, it seems impossible for a world leader to allow countries to willy-nilly fire missiles. And again, this is not Ukraine being given a drone and they firing it into Moscow. That's one thing. Putin has effectively accepted that as Ukraine holding the thing, even if the US or one of the Western countries are given an intelligence. Putin has accepted, okay, I would live with this because I don't want to provoke a world war. But if it takes you to do it, that's different. That's the distinction. And I don't know how you get around that. I just don't know how you get around that. The moment that you allow five of those, where you effectively Germany fires five missiles, and you don't respond, oh, what does that mean? Like, what are you in for? That gives NATO free license to take pop shots at your country because they accept that you're too afraid to respond to it. And they already take pragmatism for weakness. So it seems like that is the pathway. If NATO wants to provoke a world war, that's the way to do it. I could be wrong. I could totally be wrong on
No,
this.
no, I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, yeah, ultimately, yeah, if what you're describing takes place, then yeah, no, I agree with you. And yeah, the intent seems to be, from what we've seen over a 10-year period, every intent is to provoke more and more war and escalate that war,
Yeah.
and to and that's why they've heavily propagandized the American public. I mean, this is a conditioning that has gone on for
Yeah.
about 10 to 15 years now, and it's equivalent to the First World War when they conditioned the public to hate Germany, and they got even the public to turn on German Americans who were very productive and
Kill the
successful
German.
immigrant group in
Yeah.
America, and there were lynching that were carried out against German citizens, German residents in the United States, and that was because the Wilson administration had set up the Committee on Public Information as a vast government propaganda effort to malign and demonize Germany. And it worked, and we've seen a parallel. We saw a parallel in the First World War with the anti-communist fervor, McCarthyism, and that's what we're seeing now with the Russia. We've seen it over 10 years, where this hatred has been whipped up toward Putin. This demonization of Putin and this anti-Russia hysteria that Russia Gate was a huge psychological warfare operation, essentially,
Agreed.
to demonize Russia, malign it, depict it as this aggressor, Putin as this devil type figure, and the liberal left just ate it up, as
Oh,
we've
they're
seen.
lunatics.
And I
Oh my
think
God, they're
that's the
lunatics.
key, because that, is a traditional opposition to U.S. wars and imperialistic foreign policy. So they've neutered the anti-war left, and so that paves the way. There's no opposition to the kind of policy you're describing that are leading
Yeah,
us into World War III, and it's becoming very close now to that. So.
I agree with you. I think the only difference is it's one thing to be anti-communist. That's bad in it, by itself. It's another thing to be anti-Russian, which is, you effectively demonizing the person versus the ideology. Like Nazi ideology fell apart, kind of, even though the German state remained. And the Soviet Union fell apart, even though, the states themselves remained, just like the US. The US government may fall apart in regards to this capitalistic, um, neocon based sociopaths that may collapse, but the US may still remain as an entity. I don't know, man. It's a little bit different. But I agree with you. I definitely agree with you.